समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The traditional cushion and taut cakes served with or without creme chantilly had endured at the Café Anton, as had a memorial celebrating the soldiers who massacred the native Nama and Herero peoples. Alongside this, a black petrol station attendant addressed his customer, raising his right arm to the proper height and saying, "Heil Hitler." It appeared not to be a joke but rather a greeting he had exchanged before with German customers, the American journalist Henry Kamm reported in 1975. 50 years on, the Namibian town of Swakopmund ought to be remarkable for nothing other than the cultural battle swirling around its genocide perpetrator memorial. There is, however, renewed interest in the resort town as scholars and journalists investigate the ideologies of the technology oligarchs bolstering President Donald Trump's second administration. The elder statesman of the so-called PayPal mafia, Peter Thiel, who was instrumental in Trump's political comeback, attended school in racially segregated Swakopmund as a 9-year-old. Thiel's protege, Elon Musk, who is also backing Germany's far-right Alternative for Deutschland party, grew up swaddled in the privileges of South Africa's apartheid regime, alongside entrepreneur David Sachs and venture capitalist Roelof Botha. Little is known about what, if anything, the South African immigrants powering Trump made of their apartheid lives and the culture that shaped their childhoods. We don't know very much of what they made of the struggle against it, as they have never publicly reflected on these issues. Elon Musk, however, has stoked social media rage over the supposed persecution of whites in modern South Africa. This white South African diasporic group, almost unnoticed until now, wields enormous power. Trump's return was fueled by people angry over the price of eggs, over transsexuals, crime, and the power of the state. Many also feared that immigration might turn the country's white majority into a minority, a far-right conspiracy theory known as the Great Replacement. Trump's first actions, including an order prescribing anti-Christian bias and an offer of asylum for white South Africans, addressed this constituency directly. That's why it's important to consider that towns like Swakopmund might represent the vision lurking behind Trump's vision for America. Even though Christian nationalism is now mainly seen as a fringe movement on America's right wing, colonial-era South Africa was its incubator. As the Second World War raged, the future Prime Minister of the country, John Vorster, proclaimed his support for the Third Reich. "We stand for Christian nationalism, which is an ally of National Socialism," he said in 1942. You can call this anti-democratic principled dictatorship if you wish. In Italy, it is called fascism. In Germany, German National Socialism. And in South Africa, Christian nationalism. Fascism's defeat, the scholar Howard Simpson noted, led the many Nazi militias campaigning in South Africa to tone down both their anti-capitalist rhetoric and their veneration of Hitler. In turn, the British colonial authorities quietly allied themselves with these white fascist groups, regarding them as allies against emerging African nationalism. The region's wealth and white privilege attracted immigrants from around the world. Musk's maternal grandfather, the Canadian-American chiropractor Joshua Haldeman, immigrated to South Africa. The journalist Joshua Benton later unearthed Haldeman's writings and speeches, exposing a very dark inner world of racism. To Haldeman, South Africa was the center of an impending battle pitting white Christian civilization against an international conspiracy of Jewish bankers and, I quote, hordes of colored people. Less is known about the ideological zeitgeist, the climate of the Thiel family. Like other white families in Swakopmund, the Thiels lived in an elegant bungalow, had access to state-of-the-art medical facilities, and enjoyed membership of the uranium mining company's lavish country clubs. Labourers who were black, however, were confined to camps, I quote, known for conditions not far removed from indentured servitude, as Thiel's biographer Max Chafkin has written. Two of Thiel's contemporaries at Stanford University in the 1980s told Chafkin that he had expressed admiration for the racist state, claiming that apartheid worked and was economically sound. For his part, though, Thiel has denied ever supporting apartheid. The fact remains, however, that he never condemned it either, at least at the time, nor seems to have participated in the anti-apartheid movement that was then gathering momentum on campuses and in cities across the world. To whites of a certain mindset, this inequality wasn't due to apartheid, author-journalist Simon Cooper has very thoughtfully observed. They thought it was inscribed in nature. Errol, Musk's father, was also in the mining business and once boasted that his stake in Zambian emerald mines had made him, I quote, so much money we couldn't even close our safe. The family owned 2 homes, a plane, a yacht, and a handful of luxury cars. Errol Musk claims to have opposed apartheid but left the Progressive Federal Party after it called for all races to vote for a single parliament rather than having separate houses for different races. That was the liberal position inside the Musk family, journalist Chris McGreal has observed in a superb essay. Late in 1989, another young businessman was forming his political opinions in America. That year, 5 young black and Latin men, Corey Wise, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Antron McCrae, and Yusuf Salam, were charged with the brutal rape of Trisha Meili, a white woman who had been jogging in New York's Central Park. That young man was Donald Trump. Trump fueled the city's anger by taking out a full-page advertisement in the New York Times. "I'm not looking to psychoanalyze or understand them, I am looking to punish them. Bring back the death penalty," the advertisement read. The 5 men spent more than a decade in jail before DNA evidence established conclusively that a single separate perpetrator had in fact raped Meili. The men were awarded damages after persuasive evidence emerged that the police had coerced them into making confessions on which their convictions rested. Later, Meili, who had been beaten into a coma and lost her memories of that awful event, expressed regret for the suffering the 5 had endured. For his part, Trump never apologized for his continued hounding of the black men. The South Africans now close to him are not known to have voiced opinions on the issue, although living in America they would almost certainly have heard about it and it would have affected their thinking and consciousness. The white South African nightmare in the 1980s hanging over everything was that one day black people would rise up and massacre whites, Cooper observes. Like the US, South Africa was a violent society and becoming more violent in the 80s. The Trump-Musk political alliance would see memes resurface in mainstream political dialogue. In 2023, Musk first warned of the potential, quote, genocide of white people in South Africa. Trump evoked near identical images in his campaign rhetoric, claiming that, and I quote, American girls were being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens. That language provoked censure even from Republicans such as Mitt Romney, yet it resonated with the deepest fears of the president's supporters. Little, as I said, is known about the milieu in which figures like Thiel and Musk formed their views. But it seems reasonable to speculate that the South African white diaspora played at least some part in shaping their consciousness. Like many other diasporic communities in the West, scholar Jonathan Crush observed, the white South is sometimes oblivious to its position of privilege, having built an identity around nurturing imaginary grievances. Fueled by propaganda from extreme white nationalist lobbying organizations such as the AfriForum, this process has yielded tangible results. In 2008, white South African Brandon Huntley was even granted asylum in Canada on the grounds that he faced persecution at home, although that decision was later appealed and ultimately rejected. The notion of white persecution, interestingly, has been roundly mocked by white South Africans living in South Africa, who recognize that their black fellow citizens face an even greater risk of violence in a society torn by economic and racial injustice. Yet, this idea has gained currency among white nationalist circles in America. In one grim incident, worshippers at a black church in Charleston were shot dead by neo-Nazi Dylan Roof in protest against the purported mistreatment of white South Africans. From the 1850s to the 1870s, from 1915 to the 1920s, and from 1950 through the course of the civil rights movement, America's white nationalists employed large-scale violence to repress black claims to equality, as historian Ali Prelinger teaches us. When organized white nationalist power waned between 1880 and 1930, mobs took its place. At least 3,000 black Americans are estimated to have died in lynchings, such as the one in 1899. To generations of Americans, it appeared that the war had been won with the civil rights movement and the sweeping reforms and cultural changes of the 1970s. Yet, led by Trump and funded by figures like Musk, the project to construct a white homeland has in effect begun anew. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a consulting editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.